Mankind has had its disagreements. Many, in fact. From the moment a second Homo sapien emerged, our species went to war with itself on the battlefield of ideas. The trait of uncompromising self-righteousness continues to course through our ancestral bloodlines, hundreds of thousands of years later. It was the Germans who finally stumbled upon a resolute truth, one which we could all agree was self-evident. The asshole who came across 3 lanes of traffic without signaling to cut you off at the exit ramp was most definitely driving a Sentinel. In the decades following the war, Germany's way of life had split in 2. That meant half the people could enjoy luxury cars, while the others didn't. In the former category, Benefactor was its premier manufacturer, with the Glendale cornering the well-off bureaucrat and genocidal dictator markets respectively. Ubermacht, by comparison, was still slowly making back its morally questionable investment dollars. The Sentinel was part of Ubermacht's redesigned fleet, poised at disrupting the 70s luxury order. It wasn't until the 1980s when the mid-size coupe really began taking its competition to the cleaners. Once the public had laid eyes on the homologation special that was the Sentinel XS, a new era of performance luxury had begun. Ubermacht Sentinel Tuning Division, or STD, created something highly infectious, with many declaring love at first sight, despite having some of the worst brake lights ever, taking what was already a stellar sports coupe, upping its displacement, perfecting its aero, tightening up the suspension, bulking up the brakes, and turbocharging it, made the XS a monster. Originally designed for the tarmac and gravel of motorsport, thousands of road-going variants were required to satisfy race regulation. Much to the delight of trust fund snobs, sketchy realtors, and criminal kingpins everywhere, Ubermacht turned their XS loose on the world. And it's hard to blame them. The XS exudes the spirit of 80s excess styling and technology. Bright colors, bolstered fenders, and decklit spoilers were the main cosmetic attractions, but the interior stood out just as much with its grid gauges and patterned fabrics. You could even order one that wiped the bugs off the headlights for you. The XS quickly won the hearts of the masses, but it was even quicker at touring car championships. It wasn't long before the Sentinel had claimed victories in nearly every race it entered, even seeing limited success as a rally car. Its small but powerful 4-cylinder gave the Sentinel a commendable lap time, and the sound of an angry beehive. To put it into perspective, the Sentinel of the 80s can eclipse modern XS models whilst also keeping pace with the smaller and newer Cypher. From then on, the XS became a mainstay in the Ubermacht fleet and a textbook piece of automotive excellence. An original XS is practically an investment at this point, the value soaring higher with each and every track day oopsie and drift tournament wipeout. 4 generations later, the Sentinel had been fully redesigned for the decade that gave us the War on Terror, depraved reality television, and purple ketchup. The Sentinel of the new millennia brought the coupe category once again to its knees, with more power and a redesign that meant business. These were the Sentinels for risk-takers, being popular amongst businessmen, lawyers, and anyone ready to put it all on the line for an extra 5 minutes off their commute. 2 decades and 3 to 4 abusive owners later, and there are still enthusiasts and optimistic suckers ready to roll the dice on one they saw off a Life Invader for 5 digits. The Sentinel followed the design trend of smoothing out 80s expressiveness in favor of a bolder, more muted look. Just like how action heroes began shaving their heads in the 2000s. Nothing projected manliness quite like smooth surfaces and repressed feelings. Take a look at that interior too. Very serious and very grey. At the time, much of the Ubermacht lineup fit the look of slacks, button-ups, and blazers for important grown-ups doing important grown-up things. While the Sentinel had nothing but a tequila-stained suit jacket after a 3-night bender at the Unicorn. This is because it featured a design language similar to its relatives, but in a smaller, sportier package. Meaning the Sentinel was not a shower, but in fact a grower. This was thanks to its redesigned engine with more displacement and a second cam. Or a diesel engine, for all the Europeans who were into that sort of thing. This was all fine and dandy if you were content with sunset cruises along the GOH, or visiting your second wife for the weekend. But what if you wanted to commit adultery, and be back in time to ask your wife what's for dinner? The XS was the car to get you there. The vent spoiler and Stage 2 turbo kit gave you the confidence of a washed-up movie star halfway through an 8-ball, allowing you to easily slice through oncoming traffic, graze pedestrians, or become pulpy roadside scrap metal. Even more elusive than the 4th generation XS was its ultra-rare homologation counterpart, the Strassen version Endurance Experimental, spelled with an X. Übermacht made 10 of these barely legal street cars to once again qualify for motorsport. The Sentinel started doing what it did best, and was met with a swift ban. This was because Pfister realized it would be easier to beat Übermacht with a rulebook than a race car. So they tattled to regulators that Übermacht might have only made sort of 6 cars available to the public, instead of the full 10. While most are in museums and personal collections, rumor has it there's one out there street racing. Even if that were true, you'd have an easier time finding a solid gold unicorn. But right in time for the recession, Ubermacht refreshed their Sentinel with the 5th iteration. The front fascia was completely remodeled. Its iconic liver grille was widened, and the signature headlights were made more aggressive. To emphasize the Sentinel's boisterous physique even further, the front wheel arches were made to extend over the bumper like a Spartan helmet, forming the car's splitter chin. It's almost as if Ubermacht knew that half the world would be staring at the front end of this car from their rear view. Leave it to the Germans to marry the beauty of a promiscuous duchess with the aggression of a jackhammer. Many saw this curvaceous reimagining to be the first glimpse into a brave new world for Ubermacht. Except the body was all that was really new about it. Rumors of a V8 platform were dashed once the hood opened, and the exact same engine from last time stared back. But don't feel too bad for yourself. Anyone who bought a Zion experienced the very same thing for double the price. But did I mention your midlife crisis came topless, on demand? That's because anything outside of the car was infinitely more interesting than the 5th generation's interior. Except this time the center console had a cubbyhole and a cassette player, all in the year 2008. The other quirk was the return of this mysterious lever next to the steering wheel, which Ubermacht's clientele have yet to decipher. With regards to performance, not much has changed. It hasn't gotten any better than the competition, nor has it been any worse. In fact, the XS package has very little to offer, let alone stand apart from the base model. There were no additional vents or scoops. Instead, for an extra couple grand, Ubermacht would tack on a spoiler and give you a slightly bigger radiator. Before cosmetic packages, the XS even cost less than the convertible at dealerships. Wrap your head around that one. There were still special editions and even aftermarket tunes that fought to bring back the old magic, but it just wasn't the same. Even Ubermacht knew that the Sentinel was growing old, and no oversized grille could stop it. That's why cars like the Cypher and the Niobe took the limelight. But really, like everyone else, Ubermacht knows that the Rebels and Oracles pay the bills, not the sports cars. That's why the XS badge merely represents the numbers in your bank account and not the numbers on your speedometer. Nevertheless, the Sentinel remains an integral part in racing heritage and road rage across the globe. It has and always will be more than just the middleman between the Oracle and the Cypher. That's because the Sentinel and the XS made Ubermacht the power trip on wheels the brand is known as today.